Hello and welcome to JRock's Pop Culture Revolution. This is episode number 35, and I'm your host, Jason JRock Houston. And you are watching JRock's Pop Culture Revolution, as I said. And this is episode number 35 to be exact. And this is what we're going to be talking all about tonight, folks. Happy days, but specifically, we're going to talk about one character in general, and that is the Fonz, Arthur Fonzarelli. Now, if you were a fan of Happy Days like me, probably many of you out there just love the Fonz, and so we are going to be talking obviously about Happy Days, but specifically today, we're going to be talking about the 1970s Fonzie craze. And Fonzie became one of the most popular characters on TV, starting from the 1970s through the 1980s. And in fact, the actor that played the Fonz, Henry Winkler, he was so great at playing the Fonz that in the end, when the show ended in 1984, because he was so great at that character, playing that role, which he became known for several years, he suffered from being typecast as the Fonz. After the show ended, he produced shows like MacGyver, and he did some other acting, but it would take him a number of years until the typecasting kind of went out the window. But he continued on with his career up until today, and he remains very successful. Director, producer, writer. He's written some books, and so we'll see if we have time to get into all that. But we first all came to know Henry Winkler in his role as the Fonz, and so again, this is what we're going to be talking about today. So let's get right into it. Okay, so who was Fonzie, you might ask? Well, anybody that knows the Fonzie, Arthur Fonzarelli, you know him because you watched the classic TV show Happy Days from the 1970s through the 1980s. The show went off there in 1984, as I said. So, but let's get into it. So for anybody who doesn't know, or you've forgotten who the Fonz was, let's get into it. Who was Fonzie? Fonzie was, actually, this is the character Fonzie. His birth name was given as Arthur Fonzarelli. He was a character on the TV sitcom Happy Days, as I said, played by Henry Winkler. The show debuted in 1974, and it was set in the 1950s in Milwaukee. Originally, the central character of Happy Days originally was Richie Cunningham, of course, played by none other than Ron Howard. Ron Howard was a very young teenager. He was probably 18 or 19 when he started on Happy Days, maybe even a little older, maybe in his early 20s even. And Happy Days was the first thing Ron Howard had done following being on the Andy Griffith Show, and now Ron Howard was all grown up, and so for most of his career, people referred to him as Little Ronnie Howard. Well, Little Ronnie Howard was now Big Richie Cunningham, and starring on this new 1970s sitcom, and playing the central character of Richie Cunningham. Happy Days originally was supposed to be centered around Richie Cunningham, who the middle child of the Cunninghams, Mr. and Mrs. C. Of course, the Cunninghams had a younger sister, Joni, had an older brother, Chuck, when the series originally came on the air. But eventually, what happened was because Chuck didn't do a lot of more than coming in scenes from time to time, he would dribble a basketball, say ha ha, and he had just a few lines, and so eventually the character of Chuck, the older brother, was kind of phased out. It got to the point by the final episode when Joni and Chachi are getting married and everybody's in the Cunningham backyard. Mr. C makes a toast, and he talks about their two lovely children, Richie and Joni. And there's no mention of Chuck. There's never a mention of Chuck died or he went away or anything. He just kind of disappeared. And I've heard Gary Marshall talk about this over years, and they started referring this as the Chuck Cunningham syndrome, where Gary Marshall says, from time to time, characters you see a character, but they just kind of disappear. You never see them again. And being the creator of a show, being involved with the writing, a lot of times writers felt, well, we don't really need. It's not that important to explain what happened to Chuck Cunningham, and so they didn't really care to go into it, so they just did it. And that was one of those things that throughout the history of Happy Days, people constantly, whatever happened to Chuck? It's one of those things, but Chuck Cunningham, I mean, he was expendable apparently. Chuck Cunningham was played by a few different actors, and we're just bringing this up to show you that. While there wasn't a real need to have an older brother, by the time they bring the Fonzie character into the picture, Fonzie's a few years older than Richie and the rest of the gang, and so once Richie and Fonzie become friends, there's really not a need for Richie to have an older brother. The Fonz kind of takes up for what the character of Chuck Cunningham seemed to be lacking, and it got to the point where eventually, once the Fonz becomes a regular character, the audience just fell in love with the Fonz, and so much to the point that they're like, okay, because initially the Fonz was brought in just kind of as a little side character, but then the audience reacted in such a way that the producers, the creators, Gary Marshall, didn't really even see coming. It totally surprised everybody to the point that eventually Gary Marshall thought, okay, we got to find a way now to move the Fonzie character somehow into a garage apartment or something above the garage where the Cunninghams live. So he's going to become part of the family. He's going to be there more and more, interacting with the family and the main cast of characters, the Cunningham family. And so that's ultimately what they did. Now you might be asking yourself, okay, why did Fonzie become so popular? There's a lot of reasons for that. Okay, Fonzie combined qualities that seemed contradictory to one another. I'll give you some examples here. Okay, he was tough but kind. Like with Fonz, he had a code of ethics. I mean, Fonzie, it seemed like a lot of times getting fights, protecting his friends. Though he was loyal. He was loyal to people that were good to him. He looked out for his friends. He thought that anybody was being picked on or made fun of or anything like that. He'd always kind of be on the side of standing up for who was on the right side. Fonzie became a local hero. Many of the local kids started to look up for the Fonz. He was the guy everybody wanted to be. All the guys wanted to be the Fonz, and all the girls wanted to be with the Fonz, if you know what I mean. So that is why a guy like that just kind of the audience reacted to him so immediately, and it was so unexpected. Gary Marshall didn't really see it coming, the creator and the main writer on the show, but I heard him say over the years that the Fonzie character was actually based on somebody that he grew up with that he went to actually school with, and so kind of interesting. I never really revealed who that guy was, but I would love to see who the Fonz was based on. Okay, and then also, again, let's talk about how the Fonz had characteristics kind of were contradictory to one another. Okay, so we mentioned he was tough but kind. Okay, he was also cool but loyal. I mean, until I watched Happy Days and I really latched onto the Fonz and fell in love with the Fonz, I don't think I knew what a nerd was. I don't think I'd ever heard that word, but Fonzie would refer to some people as a nerd or different things. But again, the Fonz was always, no matter what, he didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. He was a very kind person. He didn't let anybody get picked on or made fun of. He didn't. He thought somebody was doing somebody else wrong. He'd step in for person that maybe wasn't as tough or wasn't as cool or couldn't fight back. Um, the Fonz would stand up for those type of people. That's why he became a local hero, loved by loved by everybody. Um, even like Richie and the other kids, Ralph and Potsy, Fonzie befriends. They become friends. They start hanging out together. Fonzie, you'd say probably out of that group of people, he probably is the most. What most people say, Fonz had the most cool. Um, Everybody else kind of a follower of Fonz. They wanted to latch on and they wanted to hang around and they thought he was cool. They was hoping some of that coolness would rub off on them. Um, I don't know that it ever did. And then over the years, when Richie really got mad at Fonzie for something, you tell him off, and Richie was mad. Like if you tell the Fonz, you Bucko. Oh, no, okay. Richie said Bucko. He's mad now. So that's just kind of a couple of things about the Fonz, that were kind of contradictory. So again, he was tough but kind. He was cool but loyal. He was rebellious, but he had morals. Like for example, Fonzie was always getting into fights, but he had a moral compass. Like Fonzie would not beat somebody up that he thought, okay, it's not an equal fight. I'm much more stronger. I'm much more tougher. It's not an equal fight. Or like some you're gonna have to fight with somebody, but it's got to be a fair fight. Like for example, one of the episodes I remember, this French guy is he's at the college or something, and the gang's all going to go see this guy. He's a dueler. He's a swordsman, and so they're going to go see him perform and duel with somebody else. And then it gets to the point where this guy insults Joni. This French guy insults Joni, and so Richie's like, "Hey, you don't talk that way to my sister." And then gets to the point where Richie and this guy who's a trained swordsman, they agree to a duel, and Richie's never he's not experienced. He doesn't have the same experience, even knowing how to do a duel or anything like that with a sword. And so Fonzie finds out about it, and then he finds out not only did the guy say something insulting to Joni, Richie's younger sister, but he realized, hey, wait a minute, this isn't a fair fight. My buddy Richie, he doesn't know the first thing about dueling with a sword. This other guy, he's experienced. He knows what he's doing. It's an unfair fight. So Fonzie, who doesn't have any experience either as dueling swords or anything, but he's like, okay, I'm going to stand in for Richie. Rich, step aside. Me and this French guy, we're going to duel. He not only did he insult Joni, but he's more experienced than you. Fonzie's a street fighter, so while he's not has no experience dueling swords, Fonzie realizes, okay, me fighting, I'm a street fighter and I can take care of myself, but unlike Richie, but this guy, okay, I may not know how to duel swords like this guy does, but it's a more fair fight. It's more, this guy's going to have a little tougher time going up against me. And Fonz really doesn't know how it's going to play out, but Fonzie always bets on himself. Fonzie's always willing to step in and help somebody out, like his pal Richie. He's like, okay, Rich, there's no chance you're going to beat this guy. I'm going to stand in for you. Step aside. That's the kind of guy the Fonz is, and so that's one of the things I always loved about the Fonz, of course. He's confident without being cruel. Like, there's so many things I really dug about the Fonz. I mean, I remember watching Happy Days every week, and one of the things was Fonzie could just say so much without even really saying anything. All you have to say is, A. A could mean whatever you want it to mean, I mean, A could be like, got it handled. That's cool. Fonzie had his own little language. It's like, hey, Fonz, how you doing? A. A, but he had different types of A's, but with just an A, Fonz is communicating. That's all it really took. I used to love the fact that at the local hangout, Arnold's, the Fonz could go up to the jukebox. He hit the jukebox and music would just start playing, or he'd hit the wall at Arnold's and he could turn on and off the lights, just stuff like that. And again, as a kid, having no idea that like they're filming, this in a TV studio or anything, you just are so into the Fonz that you want to believe this stuff. It's like I remember seeing it happen in an episode. As soon as Fonz would hit the jukebox, I'd throw my fist up in there like I was hitting something, and hey, Fonzie too. He's one of these guys. Kind of, I think he's a greaser like type guy from the '50s. Rode a motorcycle, wore a leather jacket, and all this stuff. And the thing was, so like I said, he had a moral compass. That's the other thing you got to remember with Fonz. He wore like his standard outfit was blue jeans, a white T-shirt, a leather jacket. He always had a comb on him, or like never had his hair out of place, or like he looks in the mirror at the beginning of opening credits where he goes like this in front of a mirror, like, hey, don't I look cool? Hey. And it's understood. The Fonz had a language that was really all his own. And so let's talk about his trademark things about the Fonz that everybody just so loved about the Fonz. Okay, the leather jacket, the motorcycle, okay, slick back hair, like I said, the thumbs up gesture, like, hey, how you doing, Fonz? Hey, it's cool, I mean, just got into all of that. Saying, hey, okay, it's understood. How you doing, Fonz? Hey, hey, hey. Okay, well, we get it. Difficulty admitting he was wrong. Like he would say, hey, Rich, I'm sorry. Okay, I was Fonz, you don't have to say you were wrong. Okay, I won't say it then. Fonzie also had trouble. Like he would say sorry, he'd apologize about certain things, but it was real hard for him to do that. So he kind of, as hard as it was for him to say he was wrong, he also had trouble saying sorry. So every time he'd want to apologize, like to Richie or something, say, Rich, I'm such Fonz, you don't have to say you're sorry. Okay, but I won't say it. Now, let's talk about the Fonzie character became so damn popular, that then right in the middle of this 1970s Fonzie craze, when a character becomes so popular like that, they start to merchandise the hell out of it. And let's see, some of you might not have been aware that all this merchandise existed, this Fonzie kind of themed merchandise. We're going to go down a list here, and you're not going to believe it. Now, I remember, because I was there in the 1970s and the 1980s, I remember this stuff being on the market, but let's see what you all think. Okay, there were Fonzie lunchboxes, Fonzie T-shirts, there were Fonzie posters. There was a Fonzie doll, but again, in the 1970s, a young strapping lad like myself does not want to say we're playing with a doll. So you say, I've got a Fonzie action figure, okay? There was a Fonzie game, a board game, Fonzie coloring books, Fonzie trading cards, if you can believe. Now, some schools reportedly had students imitating Fonzie's hairstyles and catchphrases. The character became so dominant that scripts increasingly were centered around the Fonz. As I said, when the series started, it was supposed to be centered around the character of Richie Cunningham, played by Ron Howard. And when the Fonzie craze started to take off, where the Fonz was now the central character of Happy Days. At one point, Gary Marshall was seriously thinking about changing the name from Happy Days to Fonzie's Happy Days. And Ron Howard basically told Gary Marshall, well, look, you do what you feel you have to, Gary, but he says, if you do that, I'm going to walk away from the show, because that's not what I signed up for. He says, I get that Henry Winkler is great at what he does. I get that the audience and the viewers love him, but when I signed the contract originally, the show was supposed to be centered around my character. And he says, I have no problem with Henry Winkler or his rise in popularity, but that's how I feel. And so Gary Marshall said, okay, you know what? Okay, that's the last you're going to hear anything of this. And they just kept the Happy Days name. And I'm glad they did. Because I think if they would have done that, it would have really became a different show. And amazingly, Henry Winkler said that he spoke out against this too when he got word that Gary Marshall was saying this, and he told him, no, I'm not going to do that to Ron Howard. I'm not going to, I appreciate it. I appreciate that everybody loves the Fonz and loves my character, but, this is an ensemble cast. I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I want this to be a happy workplace. And pretty much it was. And everybody, the cast got along. And you can imagine if Henry Winkler had an out of control ego, yeah, let's call it the Fonz. Let's just call it the Fonz, or the Fonz's place. Thank God he didn't have an out of control ego, and thank God Gary Marshall really took what Ron Howard said seriously, and said, okay, we're not going to bring it up again. Now, the character became so dominant, like I said, that promotional materials started to highlight the Fonz. You started to see promotional ads even in TV guides and stuff like that, and in magazines where maybe you see an ad or something for Happy Days, but it started really to focus, mainly on the Fonz and not some of the other cast members. Okay, many viewers considered him the true star of the show. Okay, and now another thing about the Fonz. One of the things, like I said, that made the Fonz so damn cool was that leather jacket. But how many of you actually realize the leather jacket didn't start appearing until like the second or third season? In fact, in the earlier seasons, like season 1 and 2, they actually had Fonzie wearing a windbreaker, and because he was the Fonz, he still looked cool in a windbreaker. But the leather jacket, it really gave the character a lot more cool, if you know what I mean. It gave it a lot more depth, and I think it happened kind of accidentally. But there was a leather jacket controversy, so let's talk about that. One interesting fact is that network executives initially worried that Fonzie's leather jacket made him look too much like a delinquent. He looked like a hood, a biker. Early on, producers sometimes required him to wear the jacket only when standing next to his motorcycle. So again, they started having these rules about when he could or couldn't wear the jacket. It had to be when he was riding a motorcycle or next to a motorcycle. Kind of made sense, okay, I guess, but they didn't want him wearing the leather jacket in the entire episode. Eventually, it just started to happen over time. But initially, they were worried that people think he was a hood or a crook or a criminal, looked like a delinquent. And it's funny that the executives at the network, ABC, had these kind of concerns. But eventually, the Fonz just looked so cool in the leather jacket that the audience kind of demanded that. And eventually got to a point where the rules went out the window. There were no more rules for when he could and couldn't wear a leather jacket. Eventually, the leather jacket became part of the Fonz. It became part of the expected costume, if you will, the signature look for the Fonz. And it's one of those things that the audience kind of demanded, and they listened, thank God. Also, in regards to the leather jacket, another interesting aspect about that, once Fonzie started regularly wearing the leather jacket, it started this craze. I even remember as a kid, my mom and dad getting me a leather jacket because I was so into the Fonz and I wanted one so bad. In fact, I got it, I believe, for Christmas, and I wasn't the only one. But all of a sudden, there was this explosion of people going out and buying leather jackets because they wanted to look cool like their hero, the Fonz. If you can believe that, it's amazing that a TV show could have that kind of impact on somebody on what they wear. That, hey, I want to look like the Fonz. I'm gonna start wearing, white T-shirts, a leather jacket, blue jeans, get some boots, maybe start riding a motorcycle. It's amazing. But the leather jacket thing really happened. Because of the popularity of the Fonzie character, people started going out and buying leather jackets. And that is a thing. In the 1970s, leather jackets all of a sudden started to really sell well, if you know what I mean. Now, the famous mirror gag, as I was talking about in the beginning of the opening credits to Happy Days, said one of Fonzie's best known reoccurring bits involved him walking up to a mirror, checking his hair, and then stopping because it was already perfect. Often he would simply point at himself and say, "Hey, like I look cool." You often see him do that in the opening credits of the show, where he's in the apartment above where the Cunningham family live. He's got that mirror up in his apartment, and he's kind of looking at himself doing this. Hey, you also see him from time to time go into the men's bathroom at Arnold's, the local hangout, which Fonzie and the kids refer to the men's bathroom at Arnold's as the Fonz's office. He holds conferences and meetings in there. You have to see the show to know what I mean, but you often see him looking at himself in the mirror, and Arnold's in the bathroom doing the same thing. Hey, I look good, not a hair out of place. Wow. So there's that. How big was the Fonz compared to other 1970s icons? Well, okay. At his peak, Fonzie was comparable to other major entertainment phenomena of the era, such as Star Wars, Farrah Fawcett. Remember, Farrah Fawcett had the famous poster, and she's on Charlie's Angels around that time, and that poster became a hot selling item, and just because Farrah Fawcett, you had to have been there. Elvis Presley, Muhammad Ali, these were all kind of people that had that kind of same kind of phenomenon, kind of craze, people going crazy over them. Now, in regards to Happy Days, anytime you talk about Happy Days, people often refer to this phrase, jumping the shark. Now, let's talk about what that was. One reason for Fonzie remains culturally relevant is the phrase, jumping the shark. Now, what was that? In a 1977 episode, Happy Days, Fonzie literally jumped over a shark while water skiing. Again, one of those things that only the Fonz could do. And even as I remember as a little kid watching it, as he's just about ready to jump over the shark. Of course, had a stunt double, and he didn't really do it, but we're watching it, and as a kid, it looks like he did it. You're convinced the Fonz jumped over the shark, okay? And so again, he jumped over a shark while water skiing. The stunt was intended as a big ratings event. Years later, though, fans began using jumping the shark to describe the moment when a TV show has exhausted its ideas and begins relying on gimmicks, okay? This was just one of the few examples. Another example of this, but I think was much more successful, was in an episode when the Fonz jumps over 14 garbage cans outside of Arnold's Drive-In. And he ends up not making the jump. He survives, but man, he ends up in the hospital, and he's hurt for a little bit, but he survives. He makes it because, hey, again, even when the Fonz fails and he doesn't really successfully jump over 14 garbage cans, he's the Fonz. He's like Evel Knievel. He's a local hero. So even when the Fonz crashes and burns, so to speak, doesn't make the jump, he lives to tell about it. And again, Fonzie's one of these guys that only the Fonz could have a story like that, and that's why the character of the Fonz was so damn popular. Okay, and now again, the Fonz, he had a real big kind of influence on other TV characters. Many later TV cool guy characters borrowed elements from Fonzie, such as the leather jacket look, having catchphrases, rebel with a heart kind of personality, having that over the top confidence. Now, another character, my favorite pop culture character, going back to the show One Day at a Time, he was not exactly the same kind of cool as the Fonz, but I would say Dwayne F. Schneider, the superintendent on One Day at a Time, he thought he was super sexy, super cool. He was every girl's dream come true. He over exaggerated his sexual exploits and just how cool he thought he was, you know. But I would say that's probably one of the characters that came after Fonzie that kind of had that same archetype that cool factor, if you will, but in a different way. You know, Dwayne F. Schneider was a superintendent, so he doesn't really need a leather jacket, but he's got that cool looking kind of denim vest. He goes around with showing off his tattoos and got a pack of cigarettes, you know, in his side pocket there. He traded in the leather jacket for like a tool belt and stuff like that. And so it was a different type of cool, if you will. Now let's talk about the cultural impact the Fonz had. Okay, the scale of Fonzie merchandising became so large that the character transcended the television show itself. Children who rarely watched Happy Days still recognized the leather jacket. They saw it. The thumbs up pose. The nickname the Fonz, again, the Fonz's birth name was Arthur Fonzarelli, but all the kids and everybody calls him the Fonz. I mean, he was the local hero, so the Fonz, they refer to the Fonz as like, you know, kind of the equivalent of referring to Superman as Superman instead of Clark Kent, you know. So it was that kind of impact, I think, if you will. And so here's some kind of quick, fun facts that you might want to hear about. I wasn't aware, but apparently there was a Fonzie pinball machine. Again, because the character Fonzie became so damn popular, somebody out there wanted to make a pinball machine based on the Fonz. And here's some fun facts. It was the manufacturer that made the Fonzie pinball machine actually was Bali, the Bali Pinball Corporation. It was released in September of 1977. Theme 8-ball pool billiards, early solid electronic pinball machine. Up to 4 people could play the machine. And there were approximately 20 to 230 machines, making it one of the best-selling pinball machines ever made. Now, why it's called the Fonzie machine? Okay, the back-glass artwork shows a leather jacket, cool guy playing pool who looks remarkably like Fonzie alongside a woman resembling Pinky Tuscadero, who, of course, was Fonzie's girlfriend in some of the Happy Days episodes. Bali never licensed the pinball machine, you know, as Happy Days or anything. So the resemblance was really an unofficial Fonzie pinball machine. Collectors have been calling it the Fonzie of Happy Days machine for decades. Now, here's some historical importance about the pinball machine. The machine arrived during pinball's transition from electromechanical games to solid-state electronics. Instead of mechanical score reels, it used digital displays and microprocess-controlled electronics, which represented the future of pinball. Bally Pinball Corporation was one of the companies leading in this technology in the 1970s. Now, record-breaking sales took place for this pinball machine. For many years, 8-ball was the best-selling pinball machine ever produced. The production run of over 20,000 units held the industry sale record until release of the Addams Family in the early 1990s, if you can believe that. Gameplay trivia here, okay? The entire game revolves around a pool table theme, okay? In case anybody out there is interested. Targets correspond to pool balls. Players try to run the rack like a billiards game. The center of the playfield resembles a pool table. Success depends on completing numbered sequences and strategic shot making shots. Okay. Artwork trivia. Okay. The artwork was created by pinball artists Paul Ferris and Margaret Hudson, whose work helped define the colorful look of the late 1970s Bally pinball machines. Fun connection to Happy Days here, okay? Although 8-ball is the machine most collectors call the Fonzie pinball machine, the actual pinball machine most often seen in Arnold's diner on Happy Days was a different Bally game called Nip It. In many episodes, Fonzie can be seen playing it. Pinball fans often point out that this was historically inaccurate because the show's setting was in the late 1950s, while Nip It was released in 1973. That's one of those small key facts that really didn't seem to matter. It's one of those things that unless you're a real pinball expert, you might not pick up on that. And that's why able to get away with stuff like that, you know. But back in the 1950s, pinball was kind of, you know, it was kind of a new thing and very popular. Now, a few more things you need to know about this. The original machines are highly collectible today. Many surviving examples have won playfields because they were extremely popular on location. Restored examples often feature upgrades, electronics, and LED lighting. Among collectors, do you have a Fonzie usually means, do you own an 8-ball rather than an actual Happy Days themed game? So that's another thing to keep in mind. A rare piece of pop culture timing. 8-ball was released at the height of Fonzie fever in 1977. Happy Days was one of the most popular shows in television history, and the character of Fonzie had become a cultural phenomenon, whether intentional or not. The artwork captured the look perfectly, helping the machine become one of the most memorable pinball machines of all time. One of the most amusing bits of trivia is that Bally never officially admitted the artwork was Fonzie. Yet nearly 50 years later, collectors still refer to 8-ball as the Fonzie machine. The unofficial nickname has arguably become more famous than the game's actual title among casual fans. Again, and that's just because one of those things that, you know, the Fonz are just so super cool. And again, man, so just to kind of close this out, to show you just how much of a Fonzie craze there was. Okay, some other merchandise that was available at the time. We talked a little bit about the Fonzie action figure. Okay, then you had Happy Days action figures to go along with the Fonz act. So you could get a, they're very doll-like, but you could get a Richie or a Ralph Malph or a Potsy action figure as well as a Fonz. You could get Fonzie's Garage playset, Fonzie's Jalopy, chrome engine parts, detailed body styling, sized for Mego figures. Fonzie's motorcycle, you know, they had where many boys would go out and buy a model of, you know, Fonzie's motorcycle. Fonzie's Real Cool Game used a jukebox themed scoring system, let players compete for coolness, capitalize directly on Fonzie's image and catchphrases. Okay. Lunch boxes and thermoses. Anytime you got something in pop culture becoming that popular, you can guarantee that there's a lunchbox for it. Fonzie T-shirts, iron-on transfers. That's a big thing back in the 1970s. Posters of the Fonz, sticker sets, trading cards, as we said, coloring books, story books, and children's books, school supplies. Like Fonzie notebooks, Fonzie pencil cases, folders, pencil sharpeners, erasers, drinking glass, and mugs. Some fast food promotions, department stores, mail order offers. I remember they had like a Fonz drinking mug, I think, that I got as a kid through McDonald's of all places. Records and audio products. They had character themed albums, story records, children's spoken word records. That was another thing back in the day. You had buttons and pins, a Fonzie Halloween costume, fan club merchandise, membership card, autographed photos, newsletters, posters. That's kind of to show you just how popular the Fonz was. Now, I had a lot of fun doing this tonight because I'm such a fan of the Fonz, as you can tell. And man, it was really fun going back in time and looking at just the craze there was surrounding the Fonz and all that merchandising I forgot about. I'm going to do my best that when we post the episode here, that I'm going to go online and try to find some photos of some of this classic merchandise that we talked about that was centered around the Fonz. So with no further ado, hey, I am Jason JRock Houston. You have been watching episode number 35, folks, of JRock's Pop Culture Revolution, the loudest voice in pop culture. And I hope after watching tonight's episode, you will see that for yourself. Thanks for watching the latest episode. And you know what? Next time, when we do episode number 36, there's going to be a new Judas Priest album we're talking about, and it's a greatest hits collection. So we will be talking about that and have a lot of fun doing that. It's been a while since we've done a music-themed episode. And so see you again. Bye for now. Have a great rest of your evening and week. Bye for now.